The first thing I'm going to do is knead the dough, and the reason I'm doing this is because I want the dough to rest for a little while. I'm using a mix of maida and atta, which is whole wheat flour and all-purpose flour. Makes it slightly more healthy because maida, as they say, is not a very healthy carb to eat. And once the kneading process is done, we'll get on with making the sabzi, which is the tarkari. What I'm going to do is add a little oil to it so that and mix it. It needs to resemble breadcrumbs. And once that is done, we add water. A lot of people prefer to add warm water, but room temperature water is fine. So you need it. It needs to be a stiff dough, so I'd suggest that you add the water bit by bit and not too much of it at one go. This is what the dough needs to look like once it's finally done. And so we're going to leave it over here and cover it with a damp cloth so that it doesn't dry up while we make the tarkari. And the simplest way to get your cloth damp is to just wash your hands and dry it on a new napkin, and then use that napkin to cover your dough. Let's get down to making the tarkari. You'll peel the potatoes. I'm just taking 2 potatoes because it's just 2 of us eating, and it's a breakfast dish that I'm making right now. Peel it and dice it into little bits like this, and that's it. And we'll cook it in the pressure cooker so that it's ready quickly. I'm just going to add 1 teaspoon of oil in the pressure cooker. Once that oil is hot, we add the kalonji or the onion seeds. Once they start sputtering, put in the potatoes, add the salt and 1 green chili to give it a little bit of bite, and half a cup of water, and that's it. Give it a stir and shut it and wait for the whistle to blow. So let's get back to the dough. It's finally rested enough, I think, and now we can roll them out and fry them in oil and make those yummy, delicious puffs of delight. This is my small little kadhai that I picked up a long time ago, and I use it for frying mostly, which is why it's got all these little black marks all around. Loochies need a lot of oil, and I'm going to be using this kind of a spatula to lift them up. The holes allow the oil to drip out. We call it a jhajri, and yeah, it's a lot of oil. So this oil needs to heat, and while the oil is heating, we shall be rolling out the dough. Portion out the dough in these small little bits, and then you sort of roll them in your hand into little balls. Make sure there are no cracks so that your luchis don't break up when they're being fried. Flatten them a little bit, dip them in oil, and roll them out. You don't use any dry flour to roll these out because you don't want that flour sort of coming out loose in the oil and burning and making a mess of your oil. In the old days of joint families, people would sit together and cook, so there was always somebody rolling while somebody was frying. But nowadays, in nuclear families, it's just one person who's cooking, so you don't have a roller and a fryer. You do it all yourself. So let's roll out 4 or 5 of them and then fry them together. A perfect circle is what one is aiming at, but of course, doesn't really ever happen. But whatever, however close one can get to it. And we'll put them on this thali over here so that we can roll out a few more before we start frying. The way to check if your oil is hot enough, and if your oil isn't hot enough, the luchi is not going to puff up. The way to check is to put a little bit of the dough in the oil. If it rises to the top immediately, your oil is ready. If it doesn't, like this one is not, your oil still needs to warm up a little more. So we'll give it 5 more minutes for the oil to warm up, and yep, The oil is hot enough now, and we can start frying the Loochies. Release the Loochies gently because you don't want that oil splattering. It's really hot and burning you or dirtying up your kitchen floor. And press it gently with the ladle in the center so that the hot air sort of makes the Luchi puff up, and you have the perfect little circle, sphere rather. Don't worry if all of them don't puff up the way they're supposed to, because that happens to the best of us. Very often, if there is a little break in the dough or a crack, or it's too thin, it tends to break, and then the air doesn't, of course, the air escapes and the luchi doesn't puff up. That it's still edible and it's still nice. So the potatoes are also done. It's basically been 2 whistles of the pressure cooker. And, yeah, looks perfect. It's not. It doesn't have a gravy, but it's just nice and moist and ready to eat. I have this little secret where I'm forever invoking the spirits of my ancestors, or even my immediate near and dear ones who've passed, like my mother and my grandmothers and my aunts, who've been brilliant cooks, and I remember them whenever I'm cooking a particular traditional dish, especially, which I used to love and they used to make for me. And somehow, whenever I do that, things turn out for the best. So, cheers. Have a good meal. This is Bengali date palm jaggery, which has been melted. Ideally, this is a winter thing, and at that time, you actually get this in liquid form. It's like India's answer to maple syrup, and it is yummy. Just put it like that and roll it.